Hey friend, thank you so much for watching this podcast interview. As always, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel, and please enjoy this conversation from the New Evangelical Podcast Archive. Matt, really quick, we are recording audio, right? Just want to make sure. Okay. All right, just double checking, because all it takes is one time when you don't on my end, and we're in trouble. So.
Right.
Well, okay. So I want to unpack. It's my glass.
Oh.
I'm sorry, babe.
She's a bossy
My
bad. What can I say?
I'm so sorry.
You know how dogs emulate their parents, but I don't like to. I'm not like that. Am I that bossy? I don't know.
I do want to unpack all of that because there's a lot there. But first, let's talk about your book, Fortune.
Yeah.
What is it about? Why did you decide to write it? Let's start there, and then we'll dive into everything else.
Well, Fortune was a 30-year project.
How long?
30.
Oh my goodness.
Now, I did not start 30 years ago thinking I'm going to write a book.
Okay.
Not at all. I actually started 30 years ago thinking I want to know who I am as a Black woman, right?
Yeah, right.
And then really just because after doing the research and making some of the discoveries that I made, I realized this is not just for me. This is stuff that could help us all to understand how this construct of race was created in the first place, the impact that it had had on different families. And I don't think you can understand how to repair the world or anything in it unless you know how it broke.
Yeah.
So if we can figure out how it broke and when it broke, then we can actually begin to fix this world, fix our nation.
Yeah.
Which I believe the fundamental sin of the United States of America, and quite honestly, the power, the legal, political structure that we call race, is hierarchies of human belonging. Yeah. And Isabel Wilkerson talks about in her book Caste. She talks about this hierarchies of humanity. The way that I talk about it theologically is hierarchies of human belonging, and how that is absolutely diametrically opposed to what we see on the first page of the Bible.
I will say, reading your book, one of the things that really stood out to me was how you grounded it in a real family that really existed in a place where race-based child slavery was the norm. And I think sometimes, especially as you grow up and maybe you start decolonizing, so to speak, it's still kind of metaphysical. You're trying to put faces and names to what's going on. And your book does that. And it makes it really powerful because you're like, wait, you can trace the lineage up to now. And it's like, wait, we're not that far removed. Like, it feels in our head, for some people, so far away, but it's only a few generations ago. What was that like for you? I mean, digging into that and just discovering so much of what feels like in some ways a different world, but yet it's still very close, and we feel the effects of it still today.
Yeah, I mean, it was a different world, as in it was, a different era. They wore different dresses and stuff like that back then. Right. But then no TVs, no televisions,
no podcasts,
harpsichords, instead of guitars, that kind of, or they had some kind of, scythe, stuff like that. Yeah. But at the same time, they were all still very human. Exactly. And they were making human decisions based on what they perceived as problems on the ground. So my favorite, aha moment was realizing that my family most likely traced back to this woman named Fortune Game McGee. And we know that because we've done DNA, right? We were walking on the way over here, and I was like, okay, y'all, I'm a DNA fiend. I literally have gotten my dog DNA'd, right? So I know my dog's, deal. And
like makeup, genetic
the whole
makeup,
thing. The whole genetic story, right? Wow. So I know it. And as an African American, as you know, until I did Ancestry.com, and they're not paying me, I did not know. I did not know where I came from. I just knew Africa.
Right.
Like, you know what I mean? It's
Yep.
Africa. But I didn't know the Hausa people.
Right.
From Nigeria and the Yoruba. Going back 1,000 years, that's where they were. That's AfricanAncestry.com gave me that information.
Wow.
And I didn't know that, that actually, now that I also know I have the connection to Fortune, I know her father was the first person of African descent in my family to land on this land that we call America. But at the time, it was the colony of Maryland. It was 1686. And he was coming on a death ship that they called a slave ship. And many people on his ship died in the journey. And he came at a time where the race laws were just being formed. Like literally, he came within 24 years of the first race laws on this land.
Wow.
24 years.
Wow.
It's like nothing. It's one generation.
Right.
So those first race laws were established in 1662, and the perceived problem on the ground that they were solving for was the proliferation of mixed race children running around on plantations that were disturbing, kind of mixing up the race caste system. And so they couldn't figure out, you know, is this child free or is this child supposed to be enslaved? And what they, that's my dog. So I'm a little bit, you know, okay, I'm like a little bit of a two minds here. My dog, she's doing really well, by the way. She's laying down on the couch. All right. So here's the story. There was a guy named Thomas Key.
Okay. And
Thomas Key was in the legislature of the House of Burgesses for the colony of Virginia.
Okay.
He raped his enslaved woman, one of his enslaved women, and the product of that rape was a girl who they named Elizabeth Key. She, of course, took his last name. They were doing that, I guess, by that time.
Right.
But the colony, it was so young. Like, the Virginia colony was established in 1608. So we're talking like she was born in 1630. So we're talking like 22 years after the establishment of the colony.
Very new.
So very new. And so they're working all this out. But their tradition was that everybody got baptized. And this was like, they were Christians, like, or at least some of them were, right?
Right.
And so they insisted that he acknowledge her as his child.
Wow.
And have her baptized.
Okay.
Right. Wow. That goes so beyond. We are not taught this, but this happened to Elizabeth Key. And so, you know, flash forward about 24 years. She's 24 years old. And there's a question over whether or not she should be enslaved after her father has died, or is she set free or whatever.
Right.
She's like, wait a minute. Whoa. She's very smart, right? After all, her father was in the House of Burgesses, you know?
Right.
So she realizes, wait a minute, English law says that you cannot enslave another British citizen.
Right.
And British citizenship comes through the line of the father.
Right.
And you cannot enslave another Christian.
Right.
So she's like, wait a minute.
Right.
Like, I'm a Christian.
Right.
And my father was a British citizen.
Right.
Therefore, you cannot enslave me. So she took her case to court.
Okay.
And won.
Wow.
She won.
Wow.
So then after she won, a lot of other people said, whoa, this is the same case for me.
Right.
Because that was the practice. British men were raping their enslaved women in order to make more enslaved people. But it wasn't yet codified into law. Right. It was just kind of the practice.
Right.
And so she took it to court. She won. Lots of other people won. And then it didn't take long. I think it was 1662. So that's about 8 years later. It just took 8 years. The House of Burgess now said, okay, we have a choice. We have a problem. And the problem is we have a lot of people who are saying peace out from our plantations.
Right.
Right? They're going, I need to be free. And they're winning. So we're losing free money. We're losing our profit margin.
Right.
And so what do? They could have in that moment said, okay, we're going to transition into a true capitalist system.
Right.
We are going to pay our people what their work is worth, and they're going to be able to pay into the economy and all the rest.
Right.
And, but no, they don't do that. Instead, they just simply change the law. They changed where citizenship came from. And this is where it's so important. Citizenship decided and decides who is covered and protected by the law.
Right.
Who can be enslaved and who cannot.
Right.
So when they changed where citizenship came from and said it shall no longer come through the line of the father, but now through the line of the mother, and then added those two words, in perpetuity.
Right.
Meaning forever.
Yep.
What they did was they created a permanent slave class. And that slave class was now always and forevermore going to be black because it was African women who were being raped, who were having these children.
Right.
So now if she was enslaved, that means she's not a citizen.
Right.
And that means her child is no longer a citizen and therefore not protected by the law.
Wow.
Which means her child and her child and her child all the way to the nth generation. So that was 1662. That was Virginia. 2 years later in Maryland, they have a perceived problem on the ground, although it's different. It's literally the opposite problem. It is not white men raping enslaved women. It's white women marrying and having the children of enslaved black men.
My goodness.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. They were indentured servants, usually from Belfast, from Scotland or from Ireland. And they were falling in love with enslaved black men on the plantations where they were working as indentured servants.
Wow.
And they got married to them and had kids. There were 600 mixed race children born to white women just in the colonial period alone.
Wow.
In Maryland.
Wow.
Right? So 600.
Yeah.
So that's the perceived problem in 1664, colony of Maryland, British colony of Maryland. So how do they solve the problem?
Right.
They solve the problem by saying, heretofore, who, if there is a white woman who marries and has the children of an enslaved black man, she herself shall be enslaved to her husband's master.
Wow.
Until her husband's death. And her children shall be enslaved in perpetuity.
Wow.
Nobody ever taught me this.
No, same.
I never heard about this anywhere.
I can vouch this was not in my Abeka homeschooling curriculum. It was not in there, okay? I can attest. It was not there. I didn't know any of this.
You mean the homeschooling moms didn't want you to know that they could have been enslaved if they fell in love with a black man and had the children?
Right.
Yeah, okay, but that's not even it. There's even more. So that was 1664, so like 6 years later, they look up and they realize it only took 6 years. But now the farming class, which is actually also the legislative class, by the way, right? So the farming class, they have now begun to force their indentured white servants, women, to marry and have the children of enslaved African men. Why? Because it's economical. It creates permanent profit margin for them for generations in perpetuity. So they did that. But this is a Catholic colony. So I don't know how it came up because a lot of these people were the ones doing it. But they decided in 1670 to not shift where it all comes from, and that was Virginia, but to shift who gets to decide who is enslaved and who is indentured.
Yeah.
No longer would it be the planters who had that power because the planters were abusing that power.
Right.
So you know who they put it? They put the power in the hands of?
Who?
The church.
The church.
The church.
Great.
It was the church. And the church had the most accurate records bar none, because it was the church's responsibility to set indentured servants free from that point on, or to enslave people from that point on.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yes.
So you're doing all this work for this, like uncovering these stories.
I am only doing this work in order to understand the context that my ancestors lived in. That's it.
Right.
And then I began to realize, this is big. This is actually much bigger than just my family story.
Right.
This is literally the story of race in America.
Right.
That's what this is.
Wow. What, I mean, even for me to hear it, and I've heard you say this before, a lot of this, I have to almost like pause and be like, that's a lot to take in, because it shifts so much of our paradigm of how baked in race and racism and all of this was from the beginning.
And capitalism. And immigration policy,
yes,
and gender policy.
Yeah.
I mean, you realize with these first race laws, literally in one law, you had the intersection of race, gender, and citizenship.
Wow. Right. Just
and
all
religion.
Right there. Wow.
All in one law. So that's why when we talk about intersectional, intersectionality.
Right.
Why that's so important.
Yeah.
It's not random. It's because when we established how we would live together as a polis, right? That's all politics is how will we live together? It's the conversations that we have and the decisions that we make about how the polis will live together. When we were making those fundamental decisions back in the 1660s, all of those factors, they all came into play.
Yeah.
They were all there.
Is this why it's so important for you? I know you're so passionate about truth telling, telling the truth.
Yeah.
And do you think part of that, the reason why you're so passionate about this is because you know these things that so many people just don't know that impacts what we're seeing today? Because I think a lot of people, and it's not necessarily like a slight on them. We live in a busy world, but a lot of us are just ahistorical. We just don't have the knowledge of like where we're coming from and how these things got here, right?
Yeah.
We just kind of assume like, I guess one day someone made a decision somewhere to decide how race and class and gender all work together. And you're like, well, actually, we can trace the history of how these things began. And so for you now, it seems like a lot of your work is all about telling the truth and helping others discover what the truth is and then tell the truth. Is that kind of correct?
No, that's exactly right. And I think, what I have come to understand is that there's no ability for us to repair what race, class, gender, hierarchy broke in the world without us first understanding how it broke, when it broke, who broke it, and why. What was the function? Like, so when we ask the question of even just this construct that we call race, what did it function to do? Plato is the first person in Western civilization that actually that gave us the category that we think of called race. Plato, ideated this thing called race as something that orders society. That's what race was created to do. Conceived to do.
Yeah.
The way that he talked about it was that some people are made, he said race is the metals that different people groups are made of. Or I don't know actually if he thought of it literally, but he certainly put this in his big book, right? So the Republic. And he says some people are made of gold, others are made of silver and copper. And the gold people were created to do this for society. The copper people were created to serve society in this way. Well, that's how it works out everywhere. Western civilization, when it left Europe and decided to go discover stuff.
Yeah.
Discover, right?
Yes.
And colonize.
Yep.
The first thing that it did everywhere was to create a racial hierarchy in order to order the society. These people, in the minds of the European colonizers, were created to increase the profit of Westerners, of whoever, whether it was the Spanish, settling Puerto Rico, or the British settling Maryland, or the French settling Louisiana,
right.
Or Haiti. All of them, they were all drawing from Plato and Aristotle, right? So Aristotle, Plato's, student, was definitely the one who established foreshore hierarchy. He said in his book on politics, he said, if you have been conquered, you have demonstrated that you were created to be enslaved.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, it's eerie to hear you say that, because as I'm tracking another rise of white Christian nationalism, and I'm seeing things on Twitter, which I like to call now the new 4chan in so many ways. It's it's just become a spot of just it's crazy what I've been seeing on Twitter since.
I don't even go on there anymore.
Good for you. You should.
After I don't, and I'm glad you still call it Twitter. Ever since it became X, I was like,
and honestly, I'm not going to name the person who owns that company, but watching even his trajectory, retweeting people like Matt Walsh, I'm like, oh my goodness. But I say that because I've seen echoes of that sentiment.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, Matt Walsh is a good example of this. He's someone who has said, and I believe Charlie Kirk has echoed the sentiment that, hey, if we conquered the Americas and the indigenous people, they just deserved it. It's like, what? And I always wondered,
out of Aristotle.
I always wonder where do we get this from? And then you're like, well, here you go. It goes back even further than that.
Yeah.
And it's kind of honestly scary to me and shocking that we're in 2024 and that this kind of rhetoric is not just in the public square, but also tolerated by so many people, especially white evangelical Christians. Because Matt Walsh's audience, Charlie Kirk's audience, it's mostly white evangelicals.
Wow.
It just is. I mean, this is like data points. You can see who watches Fox News the most. You can see, who Matt is talking to, or who Charlie himself has a whole organization separate from Turning Point USA called Turning Point Faith that targets primarily white evangelical churches. And they're successful. I've been to their pastor summits before. So to hear this kind of
scary.
Yeah, it's scary. It really is. It really is. So to hear you say things where I'm like, wait, I hear some of that now in our public discourse. It's pretty freaking terrifying.
Well, see, honestly, this is one of the big reasons why I'm actually not so down, let's put it this way. I'm not like a champion of the deconstruction movement.
Tell me more. No, I want to hear why.
And it's a real movement. I mean, it's everywhere. But this is why. Because if you have not first decolonized your understanding of the world, of God, of the Bible, of Scripture, and by decolonize, what I really mean, I think in its most simple form, it is to decenter whiteness.
Yes.
Denise Ferreira da Silva is a philosopher. I love her.
Okay.
I love her.
I'm in.
She's amazing. And she wrote this book called Toward a Global Idea of Race.
Okay.
Amazing, right? So, and in this book, what she talks about is the transparent ones. The transparent is her ideation, her construct for whiteness. So when you hear me say whiteness, this is what I mean.
Yeah, tell me.
She talks about whiteness as this power, this invisible power that was shaped and formed by the people who kind of created the legal structures that we talked about back in 1662, but actually all the way up, even the 13th Amendment, right? 13th Amendment is also a construct that protects whiteness, right? Because you have the loophole that you can be free, or you're a citizen, you have rights, you cannot be enslaved. That's what the 13th Amendment, sorry.
Yep.
You cannot be enslaved unless you are imprisoned,
Caveat,
right?
yes.
Caveat. And that was to placate the Southern slaveocracy.
Right, 100%.
That had just lost all their people, but this was a way for them to get them back.
Yes.
Right? So in other words, the very foundations, the foundational assumptions that the West built its colonized worlds upon all stretch back to Aristotle and Plato. They just all do. They literally are the baseline for the Western world and the assumptions that we come to everything with. So what Denise Ferreira da Silva says is that centered whiteness centers those assumptions.
Right.
And makes them transparent so that nobody really knows where they come from.
So true.
And that transparent space is what orders the world. It literally says what is red, what is blue. If it looks at a purple sky and says that's yellow, and all of a sudden we all think it's yellow.
Yeah.
Because whiteness, and this is my key, she doesn't say this, but I say this.
Tell me.
Whiteness is actually contending to be God.
Wow.
Whiteness is at war with God. Not white people.
Right.
Whiteness.
Well, I'm glad you're differentiating because I think, and this is a really effective tactic of like these far right spaces, is they combine the two. Mm-hmm. That when someone says whiteness, they mean white people, right? Oh, all white people are bad. No, that's not what we're saying at all. In fact, would it be scary if I told you that Charlie Kirk, the founder of Turning Point USA, has tweeted, "Celebrate your whiteness"? Like that's a real tweet.
I believe
in 2024.
No,
you know?
I totally believe it.
But having you say this is yes, this is good because, and I want to be so clear to you and to everyone watching that I am very much still early on in my own decolonization process, right? I've been steeped in white evangelicalism for most of my life, grew up on talk radio. So those roots go deep, but you're right. I've often say from my Instagram account or on the podcast that if you're not decolonizing while you're deconstructing, you don't really understand deconstruction fully.
And let me like put a bow on this. Like,
please wrap it up.
Complete the circle here.
Please do.
You know, so De Silva says whiteness is the center. It is the place that defines the world. And because it defines the world, it actually then has the power to shape the world.
Yeah.
And so whiteness has shaped the world in the image that it wants.
Yeah.
And in that way, I say it's continuing with God. But here's the thing. If you have not done your decolonizing work, then all you're going to do is you're going to say, oh, I don't like that. And I don't like that in scripture. And no, that's not cool. And that's not cool. But you're still centering whiteness as the barometer by which things are measured.
Yeah.
You have not done the work to decenter this power called whiteness or eradicate it completely because you ain't white.
Right.
You're not white.
Right.
And guess what, Charlie Kirk? You're not white either.
Right. Right.
No. In fact, and that's the power of the work that I did in Fortune, which it's not only the work of people of color to do. It is actually, I think, as important for people of European descent to do the deep work of asking, where were my ancestors when this was happening?
Yeah.
What were they benefiting from it?
Right.
Were they even here yet?
Right.
If they were not even here yet, where were they?
Right.
When usually if they were not here, they were on the underside of a caste system that had nothing to do with race, but everything to do with other things in Europe.
Right.
They might have been serfs in a noble serf system, right? They might have been imprisoned on work farms that looked just like plantations here, right? They might have been under the thumb of a colonizing power like Russia or Britain or France or, and then somehow they broke free from that. And usually that's the story for people of European descent is their ancestors came here in order to escape one of two things, poverty or oppression. They were either or they were oppressed. And this was their promised land because in this place, the way that our quote founders did it, they established a new nobles and serf system that was racialized. And in that new system, any European could actually come here and thrive. But anybody else were going to be either second-class citizens like Mexicans, or they were going to be enslaved. And so the question that we really have to wrap our minds around is that really the world we want?
Right.
Is that the world that God dreams of?
Right.
Dreamt of when God created us?
Right.
Is that the world that Jesus came to establish and to die to make happen? What I've come to understand is Jesus's purpose was not actually to, save us from our individual sins. I mean, I think, yes, Jesus has the power to do that, but that's not really what the plan was. I think that Jesus came as God. Jesus was God.
Yeah.
Jesus came as the creator of all things in order to confront the powers of men that were contending for supremacy with God. And to confront the power at that point, it was actually in Jesus' time, the power of whiteness was established because Jesus came like a few thousand years or a thousand years after Plato and Aristotle. So that was already well established. And to set the image of God free. So the image of God,
wow,
which is a marker of where God rules, could flourish, so that the kingdom of God could flourish on earth.
Yeah.
The flourishing of the kingdom of God is dependent on the flourishing of the image of God in all people, all humanity, and in all that bears the breath of God, which is all the rest of creation.
Yeah. Yeah.
So...
Well, one observation and a follow-up question that I think we need to really pull this thread on. But one of the most powerful things I ever was told by someone, a good friend of mine, she said, whiteness has ruined your own heritage too, Tim. Like, you're not really white.
Yeah, that's
and
right.
I'm like, you're right. I'm half Italian. I got some Greek in me. I got some German in me.
Yep.
But I just think that I'm white. Like, it just erases any of my own cultural heritage.
No, that's exactly right.
And it's, I never made that connection in my life until like a year ago. And I was like, you're right. I don't know where I come from, to your point.
That's right.
I don't know who my ancestors are. I don't know, besides like besides eating spaghetti and meatballs, like I'm not sure what it means to be Italian, right? Like, so even for people who would be classified as white, which as we both know, by the way, even that term changes over time.
Oh yeah.
Irish people were not considered white for a long time,
That's right? That's right.
But even though I'm considered white now in America, and certainly we have to unpack my own privilege in that, it still erases so much of my actual heritage and my own ancestry that I'm not aware of.
And you know what it does? And this is, again, part of that transparency thing. Not only is it transparent in the middle, shapes all things, defines all things, but it's also untethered. It's not grounded. It literally floats above the earth, ungrounded. And so there's a sense of, there's no orientation to the world. So if there's no orientation, there's no center point, there's no compass, there's no north.
I just had an epiphany.
Okay.
Can I throw it your way?
Yes.
Well, I was thinking about when people deconstruct or they lose their church community for all kinds of reasons, right? Maybe they came out as they're fully affirming or whatever it is, and their church says you're too far gone. So many people, and I hear this all the time, feel so untethered.
Yeah.
Especially white people. They feel so untethered. And I'm wondering if what only amplifies that sense of untethering is that them as a person, because of whiteness, is so detached from their own ancestral background. That's on top of that.
Yes.
Right. So when you lose your, sorry.
Identity.
This is a lightning bolt moment.
It's huge.
Give me your thoughts on this.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking about when you find a church that's mostly white, that kind of becomes like your new identity, right? You're in Christ. This is your family, your community.
Yeah.
So you don't really need to explore who you actually are and who you're tied to because you have this community in front of you.
Yeah.
But when you lose that, there's nothing else anchoring you to like being or to grounding or where you come from. And so you have this sense of like floating almost like a hot air balloon through outer space.
That's
you're just
exactly
kind of just drifting with nowhere to go and no sense of direction.
Yeah.
I just wonder how whiteness plays into even deconstruction in that sense.
Wow. Well, let me just say that what whiteness does to try to give itself a sense of orientation is succeed.
No, I feel seen. Oh no.
Oh no!
and thence the new evangelicals were born.
Oh my God. Well, no, it's to become a power, right?
It's true though.
To become a power.
Yeah.
So what you do, what whiteness does is it says, it gives the sense of orientation for people of European descent who have been untethered from their true identities, from their true stories, from their actual people.
Yeah.
Because the thing is, back in Europe, your family had a story.
Totally.
I mean, they came here for an actual reason. There were actual things that happened, and that actual story. And it was also happening in a larger context, the context of wars and plagues and oppression and poverty and riches. And I mean, there is an actual story and struggle. But once you came here, you had to actually renounce that story in order to become white. That was the bargain.
Wow. That's the trade.
That was the trade. And whiteness gave you that noble's status.
Right.
So you traded your story and your people to become a, quote, noble in America. And that's how you get the Ulster Scots. And it's going back to my own family story, right? So again, a lot of this comes, I learned it, man.
Wow.
Like my family story. So this is deep. So Fortune's father's name was Sambo.
Okay.
Yes, he was not the first Sambo, but he was one of the first to come to America, right? But Sambo is actually a Senegalese name.
Okay.
I had no idea. It means second son. So in his name, we have part of his story.
Right.
Right. And they did not change his name when he got here. He lived the rest of his life as Sambo. His last name was Game, right? But actually not. It was, sometimes you find it as Game and other times you find it as Gam on the census and on the tax records, not census, on the tax records. And Gam likely comes from Gambia. That's where he was boarded.
Wow.
That's the only ship that came in the year that he came. So I know he came from the Gambia River, the ports of the Gambia River. And his name Sambo tells me he came from the southeastern area of Senegal. Now, the woman he fell in love with, Maudlin McGee, Maudlin was Ulster Scot. Now, the Ulster Scots, I'm like, what's an Ulster?
Yeah,
what's
right.
a Scot, right?
Right.
Okay. Well, Ulster Scots were Scots who lived in Belfast, the Northern Ireland Irish area. I mean, what are Scots doing in Belfast?
Right.
I didn't know. Well, I just figured out. I actually read it in the Maryland archives. This is all in the Maryland archives. So circa 1682, 83, 84.
Okay.
There was a huge uprising in Ireland. The Irish were rising up against the Ulster Scots, who had been taken from Scotland, planted in Ireland in order to what? Manage the plantations of the English in Ireland.
Wow. Wow. Oh, everything's connected. Wow.
Like literally like, what? So the Ulster Scots were actually, there was a big uprising. I think 12,000 people died. I mean, Ulster Scots people died in one day. They were shoved into a church and the church was lit on fire.
Oh my goodness.
I'm not kidding. Like right around 1683, right? So 1682, a year before that, Maudlin McGee and her husband, George McGee, they're like, we're getting out of here.
Right.
So they said, let's indenture ourselves. So they indentured themselves and they came to Maryland. And now, I'm going to make this fast because, we don't have forever. Fast forward, Maudlin has had an affair. Maudlin has an affair with Sambo. They bear Fortune. They name their little girl Fortune. Fortune ends up being indentured forever, until she's 31 years old. 2 successive generations are also indentured. But the McGees, George McGee and his children, they absolutely forevermore write Maudlin out of their family story. In fact, if you try to look them up, it's hard to find in any of the narratives about the McGee men, you will never find a mention of Maudlin anywhere.
Huh.
The only reason that you know that she existed is because she is listed in the court records for when Fortune was brought before the courts and indentured. They said she's the daughter of Maudlin McGee, the wife of George McGee.
Wow.
Right? And Sambo Game, right? And so we now know because of that record that Maudlin existed. But the McGees, they became among the largest slaveholding families in the country.
Wow.
They went south into Georgia. They changed Mugee, M-A-G-E-E, to McGee in order to blend in with the Irish, who were being imprisoned, by the way, in the Georgia prison colony.
Jeez.
Right? So,
wow.
And then they began to create slave plantations. Because why? Because that's what they were trained to do for generations as the plantation caretakers for the English in Northern Ireland.
Wow.
So they began to be plantation owners in Georgia, and then they moved west to Texas, all the way to Texas. So that's really kind of where they kind of were all across the South, and they became among the largest slaveholding family in the South, the McGees.
Wow.
So what I'm saying is that our histories, the Genesis, actually creates the trajectory of our stories.
Right.
And if you are untethered, right, you don't know that story,
right,
then you think you were just created to be the master. You think, well, that's who we were created to be. We're just masters.
Right.
You don't realize that actually your ancestors came here as indentured servants. And before that, they were actually forced by the English to enslave others, to colonize land. And they were struggling for some amount of freedom themselves. That's why they would go south. That's why, because they're looking for freedom too. You know, I look at this through a human lens.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to apologize for them. They did evil.
Yeah.
They really did do
Absolutely.
evil. But they were also looking for freedom. So the question that we have to ask ourselves is it possible for us to find a new way of being together in the world? We don't have to live according to the rules of whiteness.
Right.
We don't have to do that.
Right.
We don't have to live according to the constructs of colonization. We can choose another way. And the great thing, really, for the actual Christian faith, like actual brown, colonized, indigenous Jesus, is that he came to free the image of God from imperialistic colonizing powers, so that the image of God might flourish everywhere.
You run a company, an organization, right?
Yes, I do.
Speaking of all this, that helps. Is it mostly white churches? Like, tell the truth. Like, give me some background there on what you do.
Not always. I mean,
okay.
You know, so we have had 2 major contracts over the last couple of years, and many before that. But our last 2 are really indicative. One of them was a contract to work with 10 evangelical institutions to move them through a 3-year process of truth-telling, for them to examine the stories they tell about themselves so that they can become clear about what are the ways that we have contributed to the division in our society, to the confusion of narrative within the evangelical church, to the proliferation of white Christian nationalism, or even the sympathy with white Christian nationalism.
At a minimum.
Toleration of it. Yeah.
Totally.
When you can have Charlie Kirk having a white, evangelical following, that says a lot.
And no one says anything. What are white evangelicals outraged at? The gay people. Pride Month. They're not mad that Charlie Kirk hosted a mega church event at Luke Barnett's church, Arizona Dream City Church, where Trump spoke, espousing all the dehumanizing language that you can think of. Right? That doesn't make news in evangelical circles.
No.
It's Pride Month or it's critical race theory. It drives me up a wall. Anyway, I'll stop ranting. I have a separate segment for that. This is an interview, but I'm just saying I see it. It drives me crazy.
It's connected because what does white supremacy do? White supremacy wants to be above all things because white supremacy is warring with God for supremacy. So what does white supremacy do? It actually rests in men. It's actually patriarchal, right? So it is saying white men must be above all things. And when you get it into the form of Christianity, it's white Christian men are above all things. So then they're going to see, of course they would see then the LGBTQ community as a threat because it threatens white Christian maleness.
Yeah, right.
Right?
Right.
Of course they would see women's empowerment or even, Roe as a threat because, again, it threatens white men's supremacy because all of a sudden women are not tethered to how many babies they have.
Right.
And they now can make choices about their futures and compete for salaries, right? So that is a threatening thing. And of course, then they would be against not just Roe, but Brown versus the Board of Education.
That's right.
Which is what they're coming for next,
100%.
Right?
I mean, Charlie Kirk has said it. He said that the civil rights movement was a huge mistake. I mean, the stuff he said, Lisa, just... It makes me so angry, but yes, we're here again. We're here again.
They're finally saying it.
Exactly.
I'm happy.
There's no more dog whistling.
Say it till the day, really say it till you're blue in the face, Charlie Kirk, because then there's no excuse.
Totally.
Then all of those people following in those white evangelical churches and parachurch spaces that for decades when I was coming up, they would always say, "Oh no, we're good white people. we're not racist. We just happen to be conservative."
Right.
But what they
we don't see color.
We don't see color. Or I don't think of you as black, which is what I heard a lot. Right.
Oh my goodness.
So, well, then if you don't think of me as black, you don't know my family history.
Right.
You don't know me.
Yeah,
right?
you don't see me, obviously, then.
You don't see me.
Yeah.
So, but now it's obvious. It's obviated.
It is.
And so
It is.
what we need to do is we need to say to them that, look, if you are going to stand with Charlie Kirk, fine, do it. But understand that if you do that, you are standing against God. You are declaring war against God. Because Charlie Kirk has declared war against the image of God in all but white Christian men.
Right. No, 100%. I want to ask you maybe a little more of a personal question, if you don't mind, about this, because I know that you do amazing work. And honestly, even to me, you're such an inspiration with how you just talk about things. It's unbelievable. I often struggle, like, for example, the SBC, the Southern Baptist Convention. Okay. I mean, that institution was built on the right to own other people. It was built on slavery, right? That's why they defected in the, I think, late 1840s. 1840s. Thank you. And today I look and I go, that's not an institution that I think can be or should be reformed. Like, let the thing go.
Let it go.
And for the work that you do, you mentioned you work with several evangelical institutions. How do you find the balance between, like, do I really want to work inside of this system because it was built on such an unhealthy framework that really the whole house has got to be demolished and something better put in its place, versus, I think I can work within these walls and help make it better. Like, how do you balance that? How do you think about that?
No, that's a really great question. I mean, I think that, first of all, I don't think it's possible for us as a society to heal unless our institutions actually go through the process of deep interrogation of their assumptions.
Yes,
and the stories that they tell about themselves. Because those stories, the stories we tell about how we came to be, our Genesis stories, they actually lay the foundations for all that is possible and not possible within those institutions.
That's good.
And within our world. So it's not only what white Christian churches or white evangelical churches, we like to bash that, but it's not there. It's also our banking system.
Yeah.
It's also our political system.
Yeah.
It's also our universities. I mean, when you have University of Pennsylvania right here. My mom is a graduate of University of Pennsylvania. When you have Columbia University, I and my mom are graduates of Columbia University. When you have some of the top, Harvard, and they are actually suppressing thought in order to maintain the status quo with regard to Israel and Palestine.
Right.
Hello,
As
right?
we saw, right.
As we have seen.
Yep.
And they continue to do it. It's not only, it's just out of the news cycle. It's not that it has stopped.
Right.
And when you have the state of Pennsylvania right now is trying to pass a law that outlaws divestment for universities, divestment from Israel.
Right.
And says, if you divest from Israel, we will divest from you. That is a law that is going through the Pennsylvania state houses right now, and has bipartisan support.
Of course it does.
Right? So when you have that, then you actually have a baseline assumption of a way that things should work in the world. And that the baseline assumption is human hierarchy.
Yeah.
That's the baseline. That some people are just more important than others.
Yeah.
That's like the base lie, the foundational lie.
Right.
And so it's not only within evangelicalism,
right,
but it is most purely within evangelicalism.
That's a great way of putting it, because, as I've been just reading more widely, I mean, one of the books that really changed my life is, there was Color of Compromise by Jamar Tisby. That was for me, watershed moment.
Yeah.
And then The New Jim Crow. By Michelle Alexander, I believe her name is. And then I read The Bible Told Them So by J. Russell Hawkins. And it details, it focuses on South Carolina in the early days of Jim Crow, and then during the integration process. And he demonstrates with, a quarter of the book is just his sources, how white evangelical and white Protestants were the most staunchly anti-integration group, period. How they fought literally like hell to maintain those hierarchies, right?
Well, can I speak into this real quick?
Please, yes,
like,
of course.
Hold that thought. Because,
I will hold it.
Because I want to come back to the SBC. There's actually a connection here, right? So I did a little bit of research. I'm actually in the middle of getting my PhD.
Oh,
yeah, that's part of the reason why I have all these little truth bombs, right? I've been doing a lot of research, right? So one of the papers I had to write, like for this PhD, I did a little research into the SBC and their story, because my family is from South Carolina. And I was asking, they were enslaved there in Camden, South Carolina, which is right outside of Columbia. And I was asking the question of how did pastors there possibly impact, how was their preaching and their advocacy impacting the lives of my ancestors? Turns out directly so. And it led to the creation of the SBC. Yes. Creation. So when you go back, Denmark VC, you know the whole story of Denmark VC?
No, I don't.
All right, we're getting a literal history lesson here.
I'm all about it. Go ahead.
Right, so Denmark VC was a deacon at the Emmanuel. Mother Bethel, Mother Emmanuel down in Charleston.
Yes.
So he was a deacon in that church. He was a free African in that area. They had a really thriving ministry. They had a huge Black congregation in that church. It was one of the first AME churches, period. And it was certainly the first one in South Carolina. Well, as a deacon, he also was an organizer, right? And he was the organizer of what would have been one of the largest and most effective insurrections in the South, in Southern history. Except that another person of African descent, man, blew the whistle on him. And so Denmark VC ended up being executed along with, I think, 15 other people who were a part of this plot.
Wow.
And I think this was like around 1820s, I want to say, 1820s, 1822 or so. And at that same time, at First Baptist Church in Charleston, there was a pastor whose name I'm blanking on right now, so forgive me for that. But there was a pastor who was not the first pastor of this First Baptist Church. It was established ways before that. But he was the pastor at the time. He began to lobby the governor for more stringent slave laws. He began to lobby the governor for everything to clamp down on Black people, because look at this insurrection. Right. And there were actually 1,000 insurrections in the South during this period.
Wow.
There was not just one or two or three. There were 1,000 insurrections that took place over the course of the 1700s, early 1800s.
Wow.
And so at that time, in this moment in the 1820s, also think it's also the rise of the Second Great Awakening.
Yep.
That same time, they're starting to ask, maybe we should try to phase slavery out. Literally, that's what people are beginning to, in the South, they're beginning to think, maybe we should phase this out. It is this pastor of First Baptist Church in Charleston that says, no, we shouldn't phase it out. We should entrench it, and we should protect ourselves, and we should make the slave laws that much more harsh. I mean, brutal. So he actually does a sign-on letter, with all the white Baptists. They have I think it's the first Southern Baptist convention in South Carolina. It actually happens around this issue. He organizes. He then also writes the apology for slavery, the theological apology for slavery.
Like defense of it?
Defense of slavery, not apology, but you know what I mean.
Yeah. Like the apologetic.
The apologetic, thank you, for slavery, which is a defense of it.
Right.
And his defense of slavery ends up being the theological foundation upon which people fight in the Confederacy to uphold, and that upholds eventually Jim Crow.
Wow.
So that's why.
There you go.
That's why the Southern Baptists were actually the ones fighting for Jim Crow in the South at the time of Brown versus the Board of Ed. They were the tip of the spear. They were the ones who were like, hell no, we won't go, because they were created. They formed as resistance to freedom.
Right. And we're seeing that again.
Again.
Right? I mean, we're watching another cycle, right, of a huge push for even farther right direction for the SBC. And by the way, that's really saying something, because even the more quote unquote progressive SBC people are still incredibly moderate. Like, they are just moderate people, you know? And so we're not talking like, I don't know, it's not like John Shelby Spong versus Al Moore, you know? It's pretty much like your most moderate white evangelical you could think of versus like a far right deep dive.
Yeah, that's right.
Like, you know what? We literally want to enshrine in our Constitution that if you even think about having a woman as a pastor, you're automatically just disqualified. No ands, ifs, or buts. I mean, that's what they're arguing over right now in 2024. Yeah. We're in 2024, and there are people who are like, this is where we're going to plant our flag.
So that's why the genesis of the thing matters.
Yes, because if you don't mind, last thought on this.
Yeah.
I'm watching that the same people who are so emphatic on this issue in 2024 about women being pastors, also the ones minimizing and denigrating the SBC guidepost report detailing the systemic sexual abuse that was covered up by SBC leaders.
Oh yeah, come on now.
It's telling.
Now wait, think about it. This is a church that was created in order to protect a system that had slave farms.
Yeah. Garbage in, garbage out.
I mean,
right?
I mean, I'm not kidding. They bred enslaved people. Wow. A church was created in order to protect a politic. The way that we live together.
Yeah.
That had at the one of the fundamental assumptions is that it's okay. Not only okay, it is so okay to be the owner of a farm that farmed and that bred enslaved people.
Wow.
That it's so okay that that same person can go and be a missionary in Africa. That's how okay it, like, so, and it's not just, wow, they thought that, or they, you know, they lived in these assumptions for hundreds of years.
Right, hundreds, right.
For centuries.
Yeah.
And then that just translated, once slavery was over, it just translated into Jim Crow.
Totally.
Those very same people then raped their servants, you know, their house workers, their maids, because that was their mindset. They were forced, this is the thing, they were forced to comply with law, union law, when they lost the Civil War, but they never repented.
Totally.
They never repented.
Do you find that so I find it maddening, because for me, when I started reading this stuff and seeing some of the bigger picture, it was pretty logical for me to say, well, I have to repent from this because my tradition, my white evangelical tradition, taught me that.
Right.
But for some reason, it seems like people in those systems are so unwilling to actually acknowledge the legacy of serious, I would even argue, I'm going to use the word that might trigger some people, demonic harm.
Oh, yes.
Right?
No.
You know?
Yes.
But for some reason, like, all of a sudden we don't see color, or that wasn't my problem, or we can't repent from that. Like, it doesn't make any sense to me.
Oh. Well,
how do you see
here's
that?
how you understand
it blows my mind.
Who does it benefit?
Yeah, you're right.
Who does it benefit to create a religious system, a theological, let's put it this way, theological system that says that Jesus was only for my personal salvation?
Right.
In fact, I have a funny anecdote that is just so indicative of this. Back when I was writing my very first book, Evangelical does not equal Republican ... or Democrat, right? My very first book. I was kind of doing this sociological study because I took a class on organizational psych, whatever. So I got some methodology and I put it to work in writing this book. And so I did all these interviews. I did like 46 interviews with pastors and national leaders all over the country, asking two questions. Primary question was, how does your understanding of the gospel influence the platforms that you will champion in the political sphere, in the public sphere? How does your understanding of the gospel influence? So my theory was, if your understanding of the gospel is that it's about your personal salvation and only your personal salvation, then one of two things will be the case. Either you will be drawn to issues that have to do with the person, hence abortion and LGBTQ, right? Lifestyle, right?
Air quotes.
So, air quotes. And so you will be focused on those because that has to do with the individual, and your understanding of the gospel is all about individual holiness, right? And salvation. Or it will have nothing to do with it. It will literally not speak at all to anything in the public square. It has nothing to do with it. So then in 2008 was Obama's first run, right? So I was invited to speak at a conference at Yale. And it was an amazing conference over the course of this day. And we started the conference with everybody who was going to be speaking at all in the course of the day, all having like this round table in like a back room, like a conference room.
Yeah.
We were all allowed to ask one person in the room one question.
Okay.
So I was in the middle of writing my book. So I was like, who am I going to ask this question to?
Right.
So of course, I can never do anything simple. So I asked, can I ask two people? And they were like, okay.
Yeah, sure.
So Richard Land was in the room.
Okay.
And Ralph Reed was in the room.
The Ralph Reed?
The Ralph Reed.
The one who, what is it called? The
Christian Coalition.
Yes,
Ralph Reed.
It's pretty much Moral Majority 2.0.
Yeah.
Is what it is.
Literally 2.0 is the next generation of Moral Majority. So they're both in the room, right?
And then there's you.
And then there's me, right? Jim Wallace was also there.
Oh,
like,
my goodness. You got the smorgasbord.
Oh, my God. I mean, I swear to you, it was like, how did I get into this room? I don't know how I got in this room. But since I'm here, I'm going to take advantage of it.
Totally.
So I said, can I ask a question of two people? They were like, yes. So I asked Richard Land and Ralph Reed.
Oh, you went right for the jugular.
Right. So Richard Land, SBC.
Yep.
He at the time was the leader of the ERLC, which is their political arm of the Southern Baptist Convention. And of course, Ralph Reed is Ralph Reed.
Right.
And so I asked them, how does your understanding of the gospel influence the public policy that you will champion? And I was like, they proved my point. Richard Land said, well, my understanding of the gospel is that Jesus came for, to heal us of our sin. And so I stand against abortion. And he literally went into all of the abortion stuff. And I don't know if he mentioned LGBTQ, but it was all about abortion for him.
Sure.
And then Ralph Reed said, it has nothing to do with it. Ralph Reed, leader of the Christian Coalition, said his understanding of the gospel had nothing to do with the platforms he will champion. Nothing.
What?
And why? He said, because I became a Christian after I got involved in politics. So it had nothing to do with it.
That's not adding up.
That is my theory. He proved the theory. Why? Because if you're understanding, look, who does it benefit to create a theological system where your faith is only limited to the individual? It benefits those who are going to do public sin, who are going to create public policy that is oppression, that are going to do oppression. So if you're going to do oppression, then you limit the purview of what sin can be.
Right.
So that what you're doing falls outside of the purview of what sin is, so nobody can call you on it.
And that makes so much sense, because one of the big gripes that a lot of us have is, how do you read the Sermon on the Mount? How do you read the consistent passages about treating the immigrant with dignity and respect and welcoming the sojourner?
They don't.
Or James 5, which I cite often, which is a huge critique of business owners who exploit their workers for unfair profits. How do you read this Bible? Because they use the word, right? Biblical truth, biblical morality.
Oh, yeah.
How do you read this Bible and come away with, these are your cultural war talking points? It doesn't add up.
How do you read a Bible where Jesus himself comes from a people group that was serially enslaved?
Totally.
Serially.
Totally.
He was a person of color.
Right.
He was a brown man colonized by an empire that was explicitly white supremacist because they, again, were drawing from the Greek philosophers like Aristotle, who said In order to be human, you've got to basically be like us. And what that meant then was white, male, able-bodied.
Right.
So even, disabled people were not understood to be fully human, right? That's why disabled people were fighting for their civil rights in our country,
right,
all the way up into the 1990s, even now.
Even now, still fighting.
Even now. So who does it benefit?
Right.
That's the question.
I think it's a question that we're just not taught to ask, especially people who look like me, because it benefits us. Like I didn't.
You never want to have that question asked, because it will shake up.
Totally.
It will shake up the ground upon which you have found stability.
Yes.
In your untetheredness.
Exactly. You're already untethered, and this illusion of certainty or grounding is just it's an inch deep, right? And so that question does break right through the ice, because it forces you to answer it. And the answer is not pretty.
It ain't pretty.
Right? It's not pretty. And it also puts into perspective why things are the way they are. Why do people in these far right spaces advocate for the policies and practices and talking points that they do?
Yeah.
Because ultimately, who benefits? When Trump says that, all Americans, what Americans is he talking about? Right? No. It gives you a different way of seeing some of the coded language.
Yeah.
And you're like, wait a second. They're not talking about all Americans.
Yeah.
At least legally, they're talking about the ones who are going to benefit the most from this policy.
Yeah.
Right. And I think what's difficult, and maybe this is one of the big questions I wanted to ask you, because you are someone you speak from a perspective of the Christian faith often. You are grounded in the way of Jesus. That animates so much of who you are.
Brown Jesus.
Right? Yes, brown Jesus.
It's
yes.
important.
No, totally. Even from watching your activism about how you advocate for the lives of Palestinian people, like it just seems like all of it comes from this place of faith. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people, and I'm admittedly, I'm still working through it. Okay, I'm working through it. But a lot of us are struggling with how to reclaim some sense of belonging to Jesus, because we realize that the Jesus I was baptized into was a white, gun-loving, the poor just don't work hard enough, free healthcare is socialism. Jesus. I'm like, okay, well, I don't want that Jesus, right? Yeah. And I'm compelled by what I read in the Bible. But also, I've learned, don't trust how I interpret things off the top of my head, because I'm still steeped in whiteness.
Yes.
So for you, talk about the faith side of it for you. Like how is that animated for you now, being a Christ follower?
Yeah.
As Lisa Sharon Harper.
Well, I mean, I will say this decolonizing process is ongoing. And I think a real key part of it is actually learning to study scripture in community, not just with myself. The scripture was not meant to be studied just by myself.
Totally.
Or interpreted just by myself.
Totally.
It was really, truly meant to be studied in community.
Yeah.
And it was not meant to be studied in the way that we study it in the West, which is, and especially the modern Western world, whereas like you're reading this text in order to know that this exactly happened.
Yes.
That was just not the concern of pre-modern people.
That's right.
Pre-modern people were deeply concerned with truth.
Yes.
They wanted to know what is true, not what is fact.
Right. That's a big difference.
Yeah.
That's keep going.
So they wanted to know what is true.
So, right.
So they told stories in order to communicate truth.
Yep.
So when I looked at when I was writing the Very Good Gospel, right? So the Very Good Gospel is a green book, and it's actually it was my process of doing that decolonizing work in the scripture. It was a lot of it. It was the process of kind of working through it in community with others, and then also, of course, doing my own work. That I started to go deep into the first chapter of Genesis.
Yep.
And I started realizing the writers of this text were colonized. They were enslaved people. They were priests who were coming out of 70 years of enslavement in Babylon.
Yep.
And yet at the top of this text, they proclaim, and let us make all humanity in our image. And they're talking about God, like from the perspective of God. Because what they're doing is they're exiting Babylon. They're exiting 70 years of enslavement.
Yeah.
And on the way out, they're basically critiquing their enslavers' worldview, because they are doing their own decolonizing work. That's what they're doing in Genesis 1. They are decolonizing their minds.
Yeah. Wow.
When they say, and the Spirit of God hovered over the deep, right?
Yep.
That word hovered actually is to brood, like a chick broods over her eggs.
Interesting.
About to hatch something. The Spirit of God is about to hatch the world. And it's also a feminine word, ruach, right? It's a feminine word. The mother, God mother, is about to hatch the world and hovering over. This is epic poetry, and position matters in poetry.
Yeah.
Over the deep being the place of destruction.
Yes, the chaos.
The chaos.
The chaos monster. One way of thinking about it. I love that.
Yes. And on top of that, that place of chaos in the minds, in the story of the Babylonians, was the place where the gods of the Babylonians lived. Yes. And where they warred for supremacy.
Totally.
Tiamat, Marduk, right? So you have these gods that are warring for supremacy, and those gods, according to the Babylonians, had told them, the Babylonians, that humanity was created to be enslaved to the gods.
Yes.
And the Babylonians told the Hebrews, who were the ones now writing this text that was like thumbing its nose at the Babylonian worldview, the Babylonians told them, you were created to be enslaved by us.
Yep.
So here, now they are writing their own, taking agency, their own creation story, which is in the form of an epic poem. And here in the first lines, they declare God, our God is supreme.
Yep.
Our God is over all gods, literally over.
Yep.
Over the gods of our oppressors.
Yep.
Over our destruction. Over our desolation.
Yep.
And then God, the supreme God, speaks, and light breaks into the darkness and cuts the darkness. And what do we learn? What's the truth that we learn from that?
Yep.
Is it that we learn that the earth was made in 7 days and God actually, like, we get the light bulb because God said something? Like, no.
You're missing the whole point.
You're missing the point.
Yes.
The point of these oppressed people who wrote this text is that God is God.
Yep.
Not our oppressors. God cuts the darkness.
Yes.
God limits, puts boundaries even on our oppression. So though you might weep for a night, the morning is coming. The daylight, the light is coming.
Yeah.
And then you get to the climax of this whole epic poem, which is the 6th day when humans are created. Yeah. And, it's like, let us make humankind in our image. This is the very first time in the history of civilizations that the image of God has ever been placed in all humanity.
That's right.
So this is like a marker that we have to kind of sit with for a minute. These formerly enslaved people have now said that not only does the image of God not only exist in kings and queens, but it not only in us, but in all humanity.
Yep.
And they add the likeness of God, and they add, and let them exercise rada, which is the dominion. Let them exercise stewardship.
Stewardship, yeah.
Agency. So what it means then to be human is to exercise agency, to be able to make decisions that steward the world. And that is what is so fundamentally evil about oppression.
Yeah. No, I mean, you've taken us to history class. You've taken us to theology school. I mean, you're right though. And my friend Trip Fuller, he's great. Yeah. He often says, he's like, reading Genesis 1 and 2 and saying, look, this is an account of how the earth literally formed in 6 literal days, is like reading the parable of the Good Samaritan and asking Jesus, what street did this happen on?
Right.
I'm sorry. What landmark? It's like you're missing the point of what they're saying.
Yes.
And part of that is because obviously we're in such a different cultural moment.
Yeah.
We just don't know. But once and there are great theologians who uncover this stuff, right? Once you realize this is really almost a battle of chaos versus order, right? A God who wants to order the world where humans are made in the image of God versus the chaotic, dragon monsters that the Bible talks about.
Right, yeah.
It's just, and then that theme is all through. I mean, Jonah. People think Jonah was swallowed swallowed by a whale? No, it's a sea dragon. Is what we're talking about here. That's the actual language. It ties back to the world of chaos. Jonah being swallowed up by the chaotic waters and the dragons that are underneath. Now that doesn't mean we're not talking about literal. Did a dragon exist? No, it's just it's a motif. Yeah. It's a metaphor that the biblical authors use to describe, right, the unjust nature of the world and how we think about the forces of good and evil. Yeah. So I love that. I think it's really helpful because I want people who, a lot of my work, frankly, is I hope to give people a better option than you're either a white Christian nationalist or you're just not a Christian at all. Yeah. I have no beef with people who leave the Christian tradition, obviously. I mean, please, by all means, do what you got to do. I totally get it. It's not a moral judgment. But if you want to stay Christian, there are maybe millions of better ways to be Christian than whatever the hell is happening right now in 2024 white America culture, you know? And so, and I think having folks like you and others give us other ways of thinking about this and how arguably, I would argue for sure, there are more faithful ways of being a better follower of Jesus, an actual little Christ, right? That not only takes the plight of the marginalized and the oppressed seriously, but it holds up a mirror to our own privilege and says, who benefits from this? And if you were Jesus, or if Jesus was here, where would he land with this? Right? I mean, Jesus literally bears a cross for his enemies. Christian nationalism wants to crucify and build crosses for theirs. Ooh, something is wrong, right? So which way do we go? How do we partner with God, with the divine, modeling the way of Jesus that actually puts down our privilege for the sake of the other so we can make the world better together, right? Yes. That's what we gotta be thinking about.
A to the men and the women.
Hey. This was a great conversation. I feel like we can go for several more hours.
We could.
The good news is that you're a Philly local. And so we can do this again whenever you want.
I would love that. And look at Babe. I know. She's sleeping.
She's totally in. I love that. So Babe's been great. It's been wonderful. Where can folks find your work? And what are you currently up to right now? Tell me.
Oh, I'm loving it. Well, you can always find my stuff, my work at lisasharonharper.com. Really, everything is there. But also freedomroad.us is where you find my consulting work. Great. And also a lot of online webinars. We actually have a webinar series called How to Decolonize the Bible. Oh. Literally, it's our most popular thing we've ever done.
I need a link for that to put in our show notes,
literally,
for sure.
And it is powerful. Powerful. Great. So, and that was, I taught that webinar series with Reverend Renee August from South Africa. Wow. And she was the one who she was the first person to teach me to ask the question, who benefits from this read of scripture? That's a question that's so simple. It's so obvious. But I never thought to ask it. Never heard it before. But now I ask it all the time. No, for sure. So there, and also of course on social media, Lisa S. Harper on the Twitter. I'm still there, but I'm not really. I pop in occasionally. I pop in occasionally, exactly. But I'm mostly on Instagram now and Facebook. And so Instagram, Lisa S. Harper, Threads as well. Facebook, Lisa Sharon Harper. But the things that I'm doing right now that I'm really excited about are podcast, Freedom Road podcast. Oh, great. You have a podcast now. Yes. Wonderful. Yes. I'll make sure we plug that. Please. And please link to it if you can. I mean, because we have great conversations. We need to up our budget to do this. That's actually really, really, really love this. Is like fabulous. Isn't it great? Yes, it is. And so, but Freedom Road Podcast, what we do is we have those conversations as if we are marching, from Selma to Montgomery. This is what we would talk about all of our different people who come on. And so that's really something that I get a joy from. And, of course, the consulting work. So I talked a little bit about the work with Evangelicals. We're also working right now with the Episcopal Church. Wow. With their people of color, their leaders of color, to deal with internalized oppression. Ooh. And we're working with them on what it looks like to decolonize their faith and their understanding of self. And all of that. So, and there are other spaces as well. We're literally in conversation with other people about entering into relationship with them. I love that. Yeah. Lisa, I love your work. I love the work that you're doing. It's an honor to have you in studio. I'm sure we'll be marching again soon or doing something together in the near future. So thanks for coming on. It was great. Thank you. Absolutely. Boom. We nailed it. Yay. Yeah. Good job, gosh. Babe. You did so well. You did so well. Oh, now you're awake. Good job. Hey. That's so great. Thank you. Awesome. Was it? Oh, totally. Good. Yay.
Honestly, I would keep going, but it's almost 5:30. I'm like, my wife is going to kill me if I'm here any longer.
Oh my gosh, that's so fun.
That's not true. I love you so much, Sarah. I love you. Yeah.